Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review, and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. Today, we're going to be talking about my reading for Q2 of 2024. So, last week I recorded and uploaded the mid-year freakout tag. And what I realised was that normally I actually do a quarterly review. And I don't think that for me, the mid-year freakout 100% fulfilled the stuff that I would normally share with you guys. And I realised on Friday, as I was doing last week's Friday show, that I just hadn't recorded a Q2, sorry. So I'd obviously done Q1, I'd done Q4 of last year, and all this sort of jazz, and I just had never got round to doing my Q2 in review. And I mean, I know it's only been Q3 for like a week, but usually we've done this last week probably. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about the books that I've read, and we're also going to talk about a little bit of stats, and then we'll go through and kind of chat about some of the more so we'll go through, we'll do stats. I'm just grabbing my tablet here because it's got a few of the old stats on my Goodreads that I'm going to want to reference, and I forgot to write it down. So I do have my notes here. So through Q2 of 2023, I read 11 books, which is pretty cool. And let's have a look at the old stats. So going back, so we read sci-fi, one sci-fi, two fantasy, two sci-fi, three fantasy, three sci-fi, four, five, and six fantasy books. So last quarter, I had read more sci-fi than fantasy. By complete fluke, it had just happened that way. But this quarter, I've actually read 6 fantasy novels and five science fiction novels. So one of those fantasy novels was technically a short story, and one of the sci-fi novels is a short story collection, which is not particularly long. I'd say it's about as long as one of the shortest Dresden Files books, neither of which made the top books, but I have done full reviews for them on the channel, so go back through and check them out. Let's start with April. So in April, I had a bit of a weird month because I basically spent more than half of April traveling away with family and friends, and during that time I was also dealing with my wife being 7 months pregnant, or 8 months pregnant even, and just really I had very, very little free time that month, so I only actually read 3 books, but it did end up being 1,881 pages, which is actually pretty mad. I think that a lot of people would probably look at almost 2,000 pages and be like, yeah, that's a solid month. And one of the reasons that I only read 3 books is because I think all 3 were 500 plus pages, and the book of the month for that month, which is The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, was 1,100 pages, I think. So one of the longest books I've ever read. Fantastic book. Like I said, it was my book of the month. So absolutely no shade there on that length. It was totally needed, well used, whatever. Let's move on to May. So in May, I read 4 books, which is 1 more book, and in fact read 2,301 pages, which is pretty cool. I've decided to start adding the pages after watching some of Matt's fantasy book reviews monthly recaps, because he talks about the amount of pages, and it's quite interesting to see that some months he'll be like, oh, I read 3 books and it was 4,000 pages, and then some months he's like, oh, I read 10 books and it was 2,000 pages. So interesting to have that contrast. Now, in May, my favourite book was Demon in White. So that's actually, I think, is probably my favourite book for the first half of the year. I just absolutely loved it. I think that the action was spot on, the universe was spot on, lots of really good stuff that I really, really loved. So at the very tail end of May, my daughter was born. So I didn't talk about my wife being pregnant on the channel because I had spent the entire 9 months of her being pregnant keeping it a secret from one small group of friends in order to be able to tell them the day that she was born that I had another child. It worked. Nobody guessed, nobody found out. The reveal was hilarious. I had a lot of fun doing it. I messaged the group and said, hey guys, got some great news. Fiona and I are having another baby. And then they were like, oh my god, that's great, when's it due? And I was like, about an hour ago, and then sent the first photo. So I had a lot of fun doing that. But it may have felt a bit weird for you guys because I couldn't tell you because a couple of those guys watched the channel. So the long con worked out. It was very fun, but it must have felt a bit like I was announcing a baby out of nowhere to you guys on the channel. Now, so she was born at the very tail end of May, which is why I got a lot of reading done in May, because I had only one child. But then in June, my pages read drops right down. So we're on the lowest pages read, and it was 1,474 pages. I didn't read a Wheel of Time book last month, which is possibly why there's a much lower page count. And my book of the month that month was Shadow of Hyperion. So obviously that's by JCM Byrne. It's the latest in the Hybrid Helix books. And one of those things that this tells you is that if you put Shadow in the title of your book, it's possible that it will be my book of the month. So do you know what? I'm going to crack open a beer because it's Sunday and I bought this beer earlier and I deserve a beer because it's been a long weekend. And this is one of my favourites. It's a very low alcohol beer, but it's just one that I enjoy. It's a Schofferhofer grapefruit Hefeweizen, which is kind of like a grapefruit juice mixed with beer. It's really nice. Anyway, cheers. So in June, Shadow of Hyperion. So now, across the quarter, as I said before, my favourite book for the entire quarter was Demon in White, and that's by Christopher Rocchio. And the biggest surprise, the biggest surprise for me was something that I wasn't 100% certain on. So I was looking through all the books that I had read and was like, was I actually surprised about any of these? And I ended up landing on Promise of Blood being my biggest surprise. And I think it was mostly because I was expecting it to be solid, entertaining, fun, great book. I was expecting like a 4-star, and I ended up loving it and giving it 5 stars. Whereas, so the rest of the books that I read were pretty much in line with where I thought I was going to land on them. But yeah, Promise of Blood, which is by Brian McClellan. It's the first book in the Powder Mage trilogy. That one ended up being quite a big surprise in terms of how much I enjoyed it versus my expectations. And if we're talking about enjoyment versus expectations, that's where my biggest disappointment comes in. And this is going to be controversial, which is why I want to explain it. But my biggest disappointment was actually The Will of the Many by James Islington. So I really liked this book, but I was expecting it to like change my life. The reviews that I had seen on it, the amount of people that gave it Book of the Year last year, and for me it was just great, really, really great book. And I think that the biggest problem that I have with this book is probably when I came to reading it. I came to reading it when I was in a bit of a reading slump because I was not sleeping very well, because I've just had a new baby. Loads of factors heaped in to work against Will of the Many. And even though it was not a particularly long book, it took me over 2 weeks to read it. And that's also with the fact that I read basically the last 200 pages in like 36 hours. So if you think it took me like 15 days to read 400 pages of that book, and then 36 hours to read 200 pages. So it tells you where my headspace was at and like how my reading habits were and all that sort of stuff. So I think, I spent way too much time playing video games and on my phone. And like, on my phone is kind of a waste of time. Playing video games isn't a waste of time. But I was playing a lot of games when I couldn't read, really. So I was either like too tired or not really able to focus on reading, so I was playing games instead. And like, while I love and enjoy playing video games, and I'll maybe we'll do like a best video games and TV and movies and basically other mediums of the year towards the end of the year. I did think about doing one for the first half of the year, but then that'll leave it a bit boring for the second half of the year, because now I have 2 children. I will be doing a lot less things like going to the cinema, and I will have less time for games. So if I give you all of my first half favourites now, they'll probably all be the same for half 2, because obviously the big focus in terms of my hobbies and my fun time is reading, because it gets you away from the screen. I think that's the best way to communicate stories. I have this channel, I have so many friends who I can talk to about the books I'm reading, which isn't really the case always for the games that I like to play. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying I'm probably not going to talk about games, films, TV this half of the year. However, yeah, The Will of the Many ended up being actually my biggest disappointment. And it was purely because of the distance between expectations and my enjoyment. And I believe that my enjoyment, honestly, was reframed by being in a bit of a reading slump at the time. So since the end of Q2, which is like 7 days ago, I've actually finished 3 books. So the reading slump feels like it is well and truly over. So I finished an SPFBO competitor, hopeful. I don't really know how to address it. I finished an SPFBO book, which is called Surviving Westcliff by Thomas Perkins, which I'm going to record the review from like straight after this, and really loved that. Just finished this bad boy, Infinity Gate by M.R. Carey, which I loved as well, and I'm going to do the review for that after this. And I finished volume 1 of The Wandering Inn. It's only taken me 9 months. We'll talk about that as well at some point in the near future. So if you're interested in any of those reviews, the best thing to do to keep an eye on the channel is to subscribe. You can click the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a video. I upload videos Monday through Friday at 5 PM UK time. Usually Monday is a book review. Tuesday will be a not explicitly a review, but maybe doing like a list or a book tag, or like collaborating to do a spoiler cast with another booktuber. Then Wednesdays is kind of like a free floating day. Sometimes it's me going over another book related video, sometimes it's a Wandering Inn video, and then Thursdays is always Wandering Inn. Fridays is my weekly wrap up. And then sometimes on the weekends I'll post extra videos. Those will be Saturdays and Sundays, same time, UK time, 5 PM. And those will be usually like manga or comics related, so that the Monday through Friday videos are all still prose books. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video and you like the sound of that schedule, then the best thing you can do is give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and of course, drop down in the comments below and let me know what your favourite book of the last quarter has been. Have you read any of these books? Have you been able to read more or less? If you've had any big life events like, adding another child to the family, then please let me know down below, and we can chat about how much little sleep that we're getting. Anyway, it's been great to chat to you guys today, and I will speak to you tomorrow.